How could anyone do something like that in the middle of all this chaos? And I'm not even married yet. This is disgusting. Pervert. Creep. The woman, who had come as a customer to my restaurant, glared at me with a look of utter disdain. Why would she misunderstand like that? I was completely baffled. Just then, her fiancé stormed into the restaurant. That man groped me. He grabbed me. Clinging to her fiancé, she started to cry. I tried to explain the misunderstanding, but her fiancé's piercing gaze made me freeze up. Come to think of it, I saw you touch her chest earlier. What? I can't believe this. At her fiancé's words, the woman's face grew even more devastated. Was he talking about the CPR I had performed? In that situation, it should have been obvious that I was just trying to save her, with no ulterior motives, so why? However, she would later come to regret this behavior deeply. When she came to apologize, she blushed and said, "I want to, with you. Please." As she shyly approached. Cedar Inn is a family-owned restaurant with a history stretching back to the 1800s. My parents, who ran the restaurant, took pride in it and cherished the loyal customers who had supported Cedar Inn for so long. As a child, I was always proud of my parents and Cedar Inn. Naturally, my dream for the future was to take over the family business. To improve my skills as a chef, I enrolled in culinary school to earn my certification. It meant leaving my hometown, but my parents sent me off with their full support. However, while I was still in school, my father passed away. I wanted to drop out immediately and take over the restaurant. But my mother wouldn't allow it. Raymond, focus on your studies. Leave Cedar Inn to me. Trusting my mother's words, I devoted myself to my studies. I eventually earned my culinary certification and graduated from college, returning to work at Cedar Inn under my mother, who had become the head chef. But after my father's death, it seemed my mother had pushed herself too hard managing the restaurant on her own. She developed heart problems. 2 years after I returned to Cedar Inn, she passed away. I was left alone. But even by myself, I resolved to keep Cedar Inn alive. I not only focused on improving the flavor of my dishes but also taught myself how to better interact with customers. I even tried introducing trendy dishes I found on social media, hoping to attract more customers. But reality wasn't so kind. Longtime regulars wrinkled their noses at the new dishes I introduced. Even though I ignored their reactions and kept offering the new menu, the online reviews weren't great either. Raymond, did you see the Eats review? Cedar Inn's rating has dropped to 2 stars. My childhood friend, Andrew, who often came by to check on me in the restaurant, showed me his phone as he said that. Eats Review is an online review site where anyone can rate restaurants. Of course, a restaurant's permission is required for it to be listed, but the restaurant can also register itself and post its information. Since the platform had a large user base, I thought it would be good for promoting the restaurant, so I decided to sign up. It turned out to be a mistake. The staff's attitude feels like they're resting on their laurels as an established restaurant. It used to be delicious. But when I went back recently, the quality had dropped. It seems like a younger chef took over. Not worth going. Wow. They're really going all out. Stop, just stop. I couldn't help but cry out in an ear scream, and Andrew, looking apologetic, placed his phone on the table. But seriously, this is bad. We need to figure out a way to turn this around. He was trying to be encouraging, but neither of us could come up with a good idea. I'll let you know if I think of anything, Andrew said as he paid the bill and left. He was my only customer today. I sighed as I looked at the unused ingredients in the quiet, empty restaurant. One day, just like many others, 2 hours had passed since opening. Yet, no one had come in. Andrew, who worked as a security guard at the nearby high school, had recently complained that new hire quit right away. So I'd been stuck with more overnight shifts, and he hadn't been able to drop by lately. Once again, I was going to have to throw out unused ingredients. I was lost in thought about this when the sound of the entrance door opening echoed through the empty restaurant. "Welcome!" My voice cracked involuntarily. When I saw the two people who entered, I couldn't help but gasp. They were the very definition of a stunning couple. The woman, elegantly dressed in a white suit, had long, well-kept hair tied up and scanned the room with sharp, almond-shaped eyes. Behind her, the man, who gazed at her with clear affection, had a noble, refined face, and wore a sleek black long coat that seemed tailor-made to complement her appearance. "Excuse me, can we order?" Snapped out of my daze by the man's voice, I hurriedly regained my composure. At some point, they had seated themselves in the dining area and were browsing the menu. Of course. Go ahead. I'll have this seasonal A-set. What about you, Catherine? Wait a minute. I was going to order the A-set. You change yours. All right. She'll have the A-set, and I'll take the B-set. Got it. Please wait a moment. Excited to have new customers for the first time in a while, I eagerly started preparing their meals. I began by serving some pickled turnips as an appetizer. That's when the woman spoke up. "Excuse me, can I ask you something?" I was startled when she continued, "I'd like to do an interview. Can I take some photos of the restaurant, the food, and of you cooking? I also have a few questions I want to ask you." Caught off guard, I didn't know how to respond. Catherine, you're supposed to introduce yourself first in situations like this." The man laughed lightly and handed me a business card. Catherine, as he called her, hurriedly did the same. Their cards read, Killian Foster, Managing Editor at Daylight Press, and Catherine Yates, Editor-in-Chief of Upton Magazine. My name's written like this, but it's pronounced Killian. It's hard to read, right? Killian smiled as he pointed to his name on the business card. I could only manage a half-hearted "Oh, I see." Daylight Press was a well-known publishing company, one of the top 3 in the country. I write articles about restaurants with low ratings on each review to see if those reviews are really fair or not. And this time, your restaurant is in the spotlight. Not bad, huh? And you seem to have some free time. Catherine puffed out her chest proudly. Her condescending attitude rubbed me the wrong way. I'm going to have to decline. Catherine blinked in surprise. Why? If we give your restaurant a positive review, you'll get tons of new customers. Isn't it common courtesy to ask for permission ahead of time before doing something like this? What's the big deal? You don't have any other customers right now. We're offering to feature your place. Her tilted head and dismissive tone made my blood boil. But I counted to 6 in my head and held it in. Losing my temper easily was one of my flaws. I've always been quick to anger, especially when it came to Andrew, my childhood friend. When we were kids, Andrew would cry over everything. He'd cry if a bug touched him, cry when he fell, and cry when girls teased him for it. Every time Andrew cried, I'd snap at him, saying, "You're a guy. Stop crying over such small stuff." One day, Andrew came to me in tears after a boy in our class teased him, saying, "You've got such a tough-sounding name, but you're really weak." He's right, you know. You were given such a strong name, Aren't you embarrassed? Frustrated by how easily Andrew cried over everything, I ended up saying that to him. Andrew looked shocked, his lips trembling as he slowly backed away, and then he ran off, heading home. That night, Andrew's parents came to Cedar Inn in a panic, saying that Andrew had run away from home. Apparently, he left a note in his room that read, "I'll come back stronger." Hearing that, I felt the blood drain from my body. It was because of what I said out of frustration. Andrew had gone as far as the next town. My father found him and safely brought him back to his parents. "I'm sorry, Andrew." I said that because I was frustrated. You don't have to live up to your name and be strong. When I apologized to him, Andrew shook his head. It's true that I'm weak. This time, I'll find a way to get stronger so no one has to worry about me again. We made up after that, and my father, watching us with his arms crossed, gave me a stern warning. "Raymond, you have a temper, so be careful. There's a saying, a sharp tongue can cut lives. It means that if you speak carelessly in anger, it could lead to serious consequences, even death. Be as mindful with your words as you are with your knives." Those words weighed heavily on my heart. Since then, I've made a conscious effort to remember the saying, "A sharp tongue can cut lives." As I exhaled, holding back my frustration, Killian clasped his hands together apologetically in front of me. "Come on, I promise this won't hurt your restaurant." Honestly, I didn't like it, but if I could hold it together, maybe this could help restore the restaurant's reputation. With that in mind, I decided to endure. You're free to take photos. As for the interview, can we wait until after I've served all the food? Sure, that works. Thanks. Hearing my approval, Catherine immediately pulled out her camera and started snapping photos all over the place. She even walked right into the kitchen without asking and kept taking pictures without hesitation. Hey, is it true this place has been around since the 1800s? Why did you decide to become a chef here? Excuse me, we agreed to do the interview later. And please don't go into the kitchen without permission. Catherine, who had just placed a white pen on a nearby shelf, frowned in annoyance at my response. Come on, there's no one else here. What's the big deal? That's not the point. I finally raised my voice. Catherine looked at me in shock, like a deer caught in headlights. Catherine, you're being a nuisance. Come back and sit down. Killian called out, and reluctantly, Catherine returned to her seat. Honestly, I was relieved, and I let out a sigh of relief. At least Killian seemed like a reasonable guy, even if Catherine wasn't. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and focused on preparing the food. I served macaroni and cheese and clam chowder, with buffalo wings and garlic parmesan flavor as the main dish for Catherine, and a barbecue pulled pork sandwich for Killian. But Catherine wrinkled her nose. What is this? It doesn't match the atmosphere of the restaurant at all. And garlic? That's going to make my breath stink. Come on now, let's trade. You can have mine instead. Oh, thanks, Killian. As I prepared the dessert, still irritated by Catherine's comments, I suddenly heard Killian's panicked voice, Catherine. I rushed out of the kitchen to find Catherine collapsed on the floor. What happened? I don't know. She was eating her food, and then suddenly started struggling to breathe. Looking closely, Catherine was gripping her throat as if she were choking herself. This was the universal choking sign. This was the universal sign people make when they're choking, which meant Catherine had likely gotten food stuck in her throat. I had learned how to handle cases of food choking back in college. Catherine, can you hear me? I shook her shoulder and called out, but there was no response. She wasn't coughing and had gone limp. She's unconscious. Killian, call an ambulance. And there's an AED at the high school nearby, go grab it. Oh, okay. At my instructions, Killian hurriedly pulled out his phone and started dialing 911. In the meantime, I began performing chest compressions. I placed my hands in the center of her chest and pushed hard and fast, focusing on saving her. I could feel the softness under my hands, but now wasn't the time to worry about that. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Killian, who had finished his call, looked at me in shock and accused me. That's when I finally lost my patience. Just go get the AED already. If you don't hurry, she could die. My outburst startled Killian, and he quickly rushed out of the restaurant. I continued to administer chest compressions with everything I had. Suddenly, Catherine coughed. Catherine! Hang in there. I patted her shoulder to encourage her, and this time, she responded. She let out a faint groan. It looked like she had regained consciousness. I stopped the chest compressions, sat her up, and firmly patted her back. Checking her mouth from time to time, it seemed like the blockage hadn't come out yet, as she still looked like she was struggling to breathe. I decided to perform the Heimlich maneuver. I wrapped my arms around Catherine's waist from behind, leaning her body forward. I placed my fist just below her sternum and overlapped it with my other hand. I then thrust upward with strong force. After each thrust, I checked Catherine's condition. After performing the Heimlich maneuver 3 times, Catherine let out a large cough, and the piece of food she was choking on fell from her mouth. When I saw her take a deep breath, I felt the tension leave my body. She was safe. But my relief didn't last long. What do you think you're doing holding onto me like that? Catherine let out a scream and drove her elbow into me. It hit me square in the stomach, and I doubled over in pain, groaning. How dare you take advantage of me during such a critical moment? And I'm not even married yet. You're disgusting. Pervert. Creep. Catherine glared at me as if I were the filthiest thing she'd ever seen. Why would she misunderstand like this? I was completely bewildered. Just then, Killian and Andrew burst into the restaurant, with Andrew holding the AED. Since Andrew was still in his security uniform, it looked like he was in the middle of his shift. Killian. That man groped me. He grabbed me. Catherine clung to Killian, tears streaming down her face. I tried to explain the misunderstanding, but Killian's sharp glare made me hesitate. Now that you mention it, I saw you touching her chest earlier. What? I can't believe it. At Killian's words, Catherine's expression turned into one of despair. Was he referring to the chest compressions? In that situation, it should have been obvious that I was just trying to save her without any ulterior motives, so why were they twisting this? Well, Catherine, I'm just glad you're okay. If anything had happened to you, I wouldn't be able to face your father. Good thing I was able to act quickly. Killian, you saved me. Looking up at Killian with a soft gaze, Catherine blushed as her cheeks flushed pink. This is all wrong. I'm the one who saved her. Those thoughts kept swirling around in my head, but I couldn't say a word. The scene in front of me was so unbelievable that I stood there, too stunned to even get angry. Catherine, supported by Killian, glared at me with sharp eyes. I'm going to press charges for sexual assault. What? I tried to approach her to explain myself, but Killian stepped in and blocked my way. Did you see the name of the company on the business card I gave you? She's the daughter of Yates, the CEO of Daylight Press. Now, if this goes to court, who do you think will win? Killian smirked. Just then, the ambulance arrived, and Catherine was taken to the hospital as a precaution. Killian followed her. Once the sound of the ambulance siren faded, I collapsed to the floor. Andrew came over to support me. "Hey, what happened?" "There's no way you'd ever be a creep." I was just trying to help her." "So why did this have to happen?" Just like the dark night sky above me, everything in front of me seemed pitch black. Andrew gently patted my back, trying to comfort me. "If they really do take you to court, I'll be your witness, no doubt." I let out a bitter laugh at his attempt to cheer me up. I appreciated his words, but honestly, I didn't feel like I stood a chance against the daughter of a CEO from such a major publishing company. After thinking it over for a few days, I decided to close the restaurant at the end of next month. I hadn't heard from Catherine since that day, but I didn't want people to think I was closing because of her lawsuit. That's why I made my decision early. I contacted the regular customers who had been coming for years. They all sounded shocked on the phone, and then said, "That's such a shame." From the day I made the calls, more customers began showing up. They made time to visit, saying, "We wanted to stop by one last time." For these loyal customers, I took the new menu items off the table and only served the traditional dishes that had been passed down at Cedar Inn for generations. This isn't the sharp, rich flavor I remember. This is the true taste of Cedar Inn. The regulars savored their meals with smiles on their faces. Then, looking a bit guilty, they lowered their brows. "We're sorry for staying away from the restaurant for so long." No, the fault lies with me. I was too focused on attracting new customers and failed to appreciate the ones who had been coming here all along. My parents always valued you all above everything else. It's only natural to want to bring in new customers. I'll keep coming as often as I can until you close. The encouragement from these regulars brought me to the brink of tears, but I managed to hold back and expressed my gratitude as best I could. Determined to show my appreciation, I worked even harder in the kitchen, trying to serve the best food I could. The days after I decided to close were busy, even though it was only the regular customers coming in. "Raymond, want me to help serve the food?" Popping his head into the kitchen was Andrew. "That'd be great, but you've been coming here a lot lately." "How's work going?" "A new hire started, so my shifts are back to normal." "That's good to hear." "All right, take this to table 8. "Sure thing." As Andrew reached for the tray of food, his eyes caught something on a nearby shelf. "Raymond, this isn't yours, right?" Andrew pointed to a white pen. I frowned instinctively. "That's the one that CEO's daughter left behind." "Oh, that. Want me to return it for you?" "If I drop it off at Daylight Press, it'll probably get back to her." "I'd really appreciate that." Honestly, just thinking about her still makes my blood boil. "Leave it to me." Andrew picked up the pen. Then he tilted his head slightly, saying, "Huh? What is it?" "Nah, it's nothing." With a somewhat puzzled expression, Andrew pocketed the pen and went off to deliver the food. It was the day just 1 month before closing, when the storm-like CEO's daughter appeared again. That day, the restaurant was full of regulars. She seemed surprised by the sight, her eyes wide. As she hesitated, unsure where to sit, one of the regulars gestured toward a table and said, "Hey there, young lady, this spot's open." She nodded politely, lowering her head in thanks, then took a seat while glancing nervously at me as I worked in the kitchen. To be honest, I wanted her to leave. I didn't know why she was here, but I didn't have time to deal with her. We were too busy. Besides, as I had told Andrew, just thinking about her made my blood boil, and I wanted nothing more to do with her. But since she had already sat down, I had no choice. After serving the other customers, I went over to take her order. Today, she wasn't in her usual suit. Instead, she wore a cream-colored cardigan with delicate white flower embroidery and a long, flowing white skirt. I didn't come here to eat today. Then why are you here? If it's not for a meal, please make an appointment first. Maybe you thought we'd be free like last time, but as you can see, we're busy now. You're an editor-in-chief, right? If you're in any kind of leadership position, you should think about how your actions affect others. Being a CEO's daughter doesn't excuse that. I tried to remain as calm as possible as I spoke, and she lowered her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. Even so, she didn't leave. I let out a sigh. If you absolutely need to talk, sit there and wait. With that, I quickly returned to the kitchen. When I glanced at her, she seemed to shrink into her seat but kept looking around the restaurant, observing everything. I continued cooking, serving food to customers, guiding new arrivals to their tables, and taking orders, busy as always. Then, suddenly, Catherine walked into the kitchen. At first, I was annoyed, thinking she was barging in again. But when I looked up, I saw she was tense, her body stiff. Is there anything I can do to help? I was taken aback for a moment by her offer. Okay. Can you take that dish over there to table 1? The table numbers are next to the chairs. Yes. Table 1, got it. She eagerly picked up the tray and delivered the food. I watched her with some concern, but she smiled warmly as she said, "Sorry for the wait," to the customers. She seemed like a completely different person from the last time I saw her. She even greeted the next customers with a cheerful welcome and guided them to the table where she had been sitting earlier. She worked swiftly and efficiently, spotting customers who were about to leave and calling out, "Raymond, the bill, please," while also clearing empty dishes and taking orders. Thanks to her, I was able to focus on cooking more than usual. Even some of the regulars commented, the food was especially good today. After all the customers had left, I hung the closed sign on the door and went back inside. I sat down across from Catherine, who was waiting for me. She bowed deeply, placing her hands on the floor. "I'm so sorry. After you saved me, I accused you of being a pervert and a creep." I blinked in surprise as she placed a white pen on the table in front of me. It was the pen Andrew had said he'd return. This is actually a voice recorder. I had it turned on that day, hoping to record your words. Your childhood friend Andrew returned it to me, along with a note that said, "Listen carefully to what's recorded." That's how I realized you were trying to save me. Catherine raised her head, her face serious. Of course, I've dropped the charges. Also, in Andrew's note, he mentioned that you plan to close this restaurant. That's why I came here today. I apologize for showing up without notice. She bowed again, then glanced around the restaurant. The customers who were here today. They all seemed to be regulars, right? They looked so happy, enjoying your food. Just watching them made me feel full. This restaurant is truly loved. Yeah, thanks to them. When I replied, her expression turned serious. If I was the reason for the restaurant closing, you don't have to worry anymore. I won't do anything to damage your restaurant's reputation from now on. So, it's fine. I was planning to close the restaurant anyway, even before what happened. I cut her off, and her brows furrowed in sadness. When you first came here, you saw Cedar Inn and me at a low point. The only reason people are coming now is because they know it's their last chance. That's not true. Catherine leaned forward, bringing her face close to mine. I caught a soft scent of violets, possibly from her perfume, and unexpectedly felt a sweet ache in my chest. It's such a waste. This place is loved so much. Please, let me do a proper interview. I'll make sure everyone knows how great this restaurant is. Seeing the surprised look on my face, she blushed and quickly pulled back. I'll make an appointment this time, she added weakly, and I couldn't help but laugh. Her embarrassment only made her blush more deeply. And please, let me help with the restaurant, too. I want to experience working here myself so I can understand what makes Cedar Inn so special. That way, I can write a really great article. That's a bit much, don't you think? No. Please, let me do at least this much. Her words were filled with determination. With a sigh, I looked her in the eye. Honestly, we could use the help. I'd been so busy, I could use a hand. And you did a great job today. So, sure, let's see what you've got. Thank you. I'll do my best. Her sparkling eyes made her look adorable, and I couldn't help but feel my heart skip a beat. The next morning, Catherine arrived at Cedar Inn bright and early. The day before, she had asked if she could join me on my morning trip to the market. I won't be a bother, she had said. I'd just like to take some photos and record some audio for the article. Since she asked in advance, I agreed, and she had sighed in relief. Good morning. Even though it was still 7 a.m., Catherine greeted me with a beaming smile that rivaled the brightness of the morning sun. Today, she was wearing the same white suit as when we first met. It must be her work attire. We headed to the market, browsing through the fish and vegetables. I picked out the items I needed, occasionally haggling over prices. Meanwhile, Catherine introduced herself to each vendor, handing out her business card and asking permission to take photos and record audio. If anyone declined, she respected their wishes and quietly observed as I made my purchases. However, since Catherine was quite beautiful, most of the vendors, especially the men, granted her permission with little hesitation. Whether she noticed this or not, she would flash a bright, innocent smile and thank them whenever they agreed. On the way back, Catherine asked me various questions. Do you have any special criteria when selecting ingredients? Not really. I just focus on freshness, and I try to use seasonal ingredients whenever possible. They taste great and are packed with nutrients. Speaking of seasonal dishes, the main course for the set has changed, hasn't it? It's now oyster Rockefeller. You noticed? I stopped in surprise. But with Catherine urging me on, I started walking again. The seasonal set itself has been around for generations, but I changed the main dish when I became head chef. I researched dishes that would appeal to younger customers, thinking it would bring in more business. It was only after I decided to close the restaurant that I realized I had been neglecting my loyal regulars. So, I went back to the old menu. I see. Yeah, I think the current menu is better. Honestly, when I first came, I was a bit taken aback to see something so different from what I expected from a historic restaurant dating back to the 1800s. Her words stung a little, and I felt a bit miffed. But Catherine didn't seem to notice. Did you mean to say that without thinking? Catherine looked at me, confused. Then, her face suddenly turned pale. Oh no! Did I offend you? I'm so sorry. From the moment we met, I had a faint suspicion, and now I was certain Catherine didn't seem to have any ill intentions behind her words or actions. I've always been told by my father to be more mindful of others because I often offend people without meaning to. Looking back, I never really listened to him, did I? I regret that now, Catherine said, her shoulders drooping dejectedly. Seeing her so downcast stirred a sense of sympathy within me. My dad used to tell me the same thing, warned me about my temper. So if I got annoyed at your comment earlier, maybe a quarter of that's just my bad personality. Only a quarter? Hey, I listened to my dad. I got annoyed, but I didn't lose my temper. My light-hearted remark seemed to lift her spirits, and she let out a soft giggle. Raymond, you're amazing. Not only for running such a fine restaurant on your own, but for your dedication and seriousness about cooking. You're just as impressive as cedar in itself. Her eyes sparkled as she looked up at me. Being stared at by such beautiful eyes made my heart race. It really would be such a waste for a place like this to close. We need to spread the word about how wonderful both you and Cedarin are. She struck a determined pose, bending her elbows and clenching her fists with enthusiasm. During the prep work after the market run, Catherine continued her coverage, snapping photos and occasionally asking me questions. When it was time to open for lunch, she took off her suit jacket, put on the apron I had prepared, and got to work serving customers. Like a delicate white violet, she moved gracefully around the restaurant, and the customers couldn't help but smile warmly as they watched her. Raymond, when did you get yourself such a nice girlfriend? One of the regulars joked when I was at the register. Catherine had suggested that I handle the payments because customers probably want to talk to you when it comes to paying the bill. I denied the comment, blushing, but the regular only laughed. Come on now, don't be shy. The dinner service passed in much the same way, and soon it was time to close the shop. Once the restaurant had emptied, Catherine sat down in one of the chairs and let out a deep breath. Good job today. I offered Catherine a cup of warm coffee and a scone. Catherine beamed at me and said, "Thank you." Her smile had a soothing effect, slowly easing away the day's fatigue. By the way, I noticed Killian didn't come with you this time. He didn't seem like just a co-worker. Is he your boyfriend or something? I remembered the way he looked at Catherine with that tender gaze, and a pang of jealousy stung my chest. But curiosity got the better of me, so I asked her about it. She slowly chewed the scone, making sure to swallow it completely. After sipping her coffee and letting out a soft breath, she gave a small, somewhat lonely smile. Killian is my fiancé. But the one he truly loves is my father. He's engaged to me because my father wanted it. Killian wants to be my father's right-hand man, and he accepted my father's suggestion to marry me. She explained the situation to me. Killian grew up in an orphanage due to family circumstances. Catherine's father provided significant financial support to the orphanage and visited weekly, showering the children with affection. Having never received love from his own parents and starved for affection, Killian came to admire Catherine's father. Determined to work for him and become his right-hand man, Killian studied hard, graduated from a prestigious university, and joined Daylight Press. My father treated Killian like a son, which is why he wanted us to marry. To be honest, I don't really love Killian. But every man who's ever shown interest in me has only cared about my money. They all acted like they adored me. But they were just trying to gain favor with the CEO's daughter. Deep down, I've always wanted to marry someone I could genuinely love. Someone who sees me as Catherine and not as the CEO's daughter. But since I've never met anyone like that, I figured Killian was the best option since at least he's not after my money. Catherine rested her chin on her hand, staring off into the distance. My dream was to become a writer, so I got into daylight press through my father's connections. I was excited at first, but soon, everyone started treating me differently because I was the CEO's daughter. When I became editor-in-chief, some of my peers made snide comments like, "Must be nice to get a good position thanks to your connections." After a while, I stopped caring about my job or even about relationships. I got lazy. I didn't even bother making appointments for interviews because I knew no one would question me if they knew who my father was. Still resting her chin on her hand, Catherine fixed her gaze on me. My heart raced, and I found myself unable to look away from her. It's been a long time since someone scolded me like that. It was embarrassing, but it made me happy. "You didn't treat me like a CEO's daughter, you treated me like a person." That's why I've decided not to give up. I'm going to do my best, both in work and in love. Catherine looked at me and smiled softly. That smile felt like a gentle spring breeze, warming my heart. Thanks to Catherine's close coverage, Cedar Inn started seeing not only regulars but also new customers. As a result, we became busier and busier. The decision to close the restaurant was canceled, thanks to overwhelming support from our customers. The joy on the faces of the regulars when I told them the news, and the way Catherine proudly said, "It's all thanks to my article," still warms my heart whenever I think about it. I shot a sharp look at Andrew, who was lounging in the seating area, watching me rush around. "Andrew, give me a hand. You helped me out last time, didn't you?" "Hey, I'm a customer right now. Besides, you've already got help." He nodded toward the entrance just as the door slid open and Catherine walked in. "Good evening. Sorry I'm late. I'll start helping right away." She flashed a bright smile, and from somewhere, a playful shout came, "Hey, finally! We've been waiting, Catherine." Catherine waved them off casually with, yeah, just wait a bit," and then headed into the kitchen, washed her hands, and put on an apron. "What should I do first?" "Take the C set to table 5. "Got it." Catherine picked up the tray with the main dish, then suddenly stopped and turned back to me, saying, "Oh, by the way, I broke off my engagement with Killian." "Aha! Wait, what?" The unexpected news nearly made me drop the knife I was holding. "Hey, don't spring stuff like that on me. I'm handling sharp knives here." "Oops, sorry," she said with a playful wink. That kind of teasing used to annoy me, but now that I knew her better, I couldn't help but find it a little cute. Killian lied, you know? He told my dad he was the one who saved me. So, I called him out on it. It was kind of sad, but apparently, he's been lying like that ever since he was in the orphanage, trying to impress the people he wanted to like him. Anyway, my dad only called off the engagement. He didn't completely cut ties with Killian, so don't worry. Not that I'm worried. Your engagement and breakup don't really concern me. Oh, I see. Catherine's face fell, and I realized I had said the wrong thing. But just then, a customer called out, "Hey, where's our food?" "I'll be right there." Catherine cheerfully responded and quickly went off to deliver the C set. As I bit my lip, planning to apologize when she returned, Catherine came back right away. "Catherine, about earlier, As I fumbled for the right words to apologize, Catherine came up to me, stepping closer with small, quick steps. "Could you put the knife down for a second?" Since she asked, and I was already feeling a bit guilty about earlier, I decided to do as she said. Luckily, there were no orders at the moment, so there was no rush. I want to work here. Is that okay? I'll make a proper appointment and even bring a resume if you want. Work here? But what about your writing? Isn't that your dream? I'll be a freelance writer. That way, I can still write and work here. Got it. Well, forget the resume and interview, I already know you well enough. You're more than welcome. Really? You mean it? For some reason, she blushed as she leaned in closer, and feeling a bit overwhelmed, I nodded, saying, yeah. Then she smiled slyly. Okay then, from today, I'll be working here as your wife. Let's do our best, Raymond. Wait, wife. It's too late to take it back now. I've got proof. She pulled the white pen out of her pocket and gave it a little wave in front of my eyes. Ever since Catherine became my wife, Cedar Inn has been thriving. Hey, Raymond. Did you see the latest review on Eats Review? Cedar Inn got a 5-star rating. Andrew beamed as he showed me and Catherine his phone. I thought it would be stuffy because it's a historic place, but it was the opposite. The staff and regulars were incredibly friendly, even to new customers. Plus, the female staff member is gorgeous. The seasonal menu is a must-try. I'll come back every time it changes. So glad I visited. Wow, it's a complete turnaround from when Catherine first came around. Well, it's all thanks to me. Catherine puffed out her chest proudly as Andrew chuckled at the change in fortunes. Don't let it get to your head, I teased, and she smiled sheepishly, her confidence softening. Catherine's reckless comment had once pushed the restaurant to the brink of closing. But her reflection and efforts helped rebuild it into a place that customers now love even more. I also learned, through this experience, to reappreciate the loyal regulars who had always supported Cedar Inn. From now on, I'll be mindful of my words and continue to cook with care, for all the important people around me. With that thought freshly etched into my heart, I moved forward.